Itikayaresin, as I was saying, kind of feels like we're missing something, doesn't it? In fact, isn't that the best way to describe these last 26 months? March of 2020. That's when this whole thing began, and when the whole world got to know what a shutdown looks like. Then there was George Floyd, BLM, trans activism, Netflix employees comparing Dave Chappelle to a Holocaust, critical race theory, Asians finding out that they're weak and vulnerable, our president and vice president unable to string together a single sentence, and our former president not knowing when to shut up and go away. Democrats taking away freedoms and Republicans who seem to think that the wrong people are voting, which would be taking away freedoms. We've been inundated with vast floods of YouTube and Twitter posts and media clickbait and songs about these past 2 years. Even many of our movies and short stories and novels are built around COVID and everything that followed in its wake. Now, many of these stories are actually allegories, but they are truly about how the world has been wrestling with itself these past 2 years. And what have we learned? Well, I want to tell you the one thing, the one throughput that I found touches on everything that we're concerned about right now, touches on everything that we've been wrestling with. Let's examine this. We're running on empty, and everywhere, within every issue, there is one crucial ingredient we're missing. I mean, we'd have to be pushing up on E if our concern about COVID is driving us to voluntarily put our children through emotional, mental, and physical stress. We'd have to be running short if our concern about COVID is driving us to sabotage our own economic health, both individually and nationally. We'd have to be gasping for air if our concern about COVID is manifested in our striving to keep our homes and keep our jobs. And no, maybe I should really categorize this as, while our rent and mortgage payments are jeopardized, many of us are more focused on keeping our individually self-defined sense of value in the marketplace. Many of us are voluntarily leaving our jobs and are content with being unemployed while we look for more lucrative positions. We'd have to be pulling in empty nets while our government worries about COVID to the extent that they keep spending money so that we can have the luxury of working from home if we work at all. And yet our government doesn't have the slightest idea how all of that is going to be paid for. We have an emptiness, don't we? A big unknown, and it doesn't stop there. Black Americans worry that they're not being properly respected by people other than themselves. And yet more and more pastors of black churches repeat the message to respect yourself. When white Americans worry that they've been far more bigoted than they've ever let on or even knew. When young boys are wondering if they're really young girls and young girls are wondering if they're really young boys or any of an infinity of genders. In fact, I just heard that one more gender has been added to the list. Isn't modern technology wonderful? When Asians and Jews are wondering when did they become so vulnerable despite their astounding successes in our society. We are all being taught that there is something fundamentally missing in our knowledge of self, and we are urged to replace that missing thing before we even are encouraged to find out what it could be, to find out what it is we're missing. And we're encouraged to replace it with whatever we determine in that moment will give us purpose and self-worth. It's all fascinating, isn't it? We are told to submit to all these authoritarian figures who are supposed to be figuring out all these do-or-die crucial issues for us. Listen to the scientists, listen to the activists, listen to the politicians, and rest assured that they have our best interest in their hearts as they enact sweeping changes that we are all expected to comply with. And at the same time, we are told to pursue individual truths and do what we feel is right to know true purpose and true happiness. Has anyone figured out yet that these two directives are mutually exclusive? One cannot pursue individual truth while having to submit. On the face of it, this is a scam of historical proportions, and yet multitudes are moving right along with this contradiction. This is causing more than a little stress. Listen, no one is going to find lasting happiness by making happiness a goal unto itself. If your goal in life is to be happy, you will stumble from moment to moment constantly seeking out that perfect high. You will become self-indulgent, lustful, self-absorbed, egomaniacal, even narcissistic. Happiness is found when you pursue your purpose. More happiness is found when you secure and fulfill that purpose, and every day work to keep securing and fulfilling it. What we're missing is a knowledge of ourselves. What we're missing is a true knowledge of our neighbor. And I don't just mean knowledge given to us by those activists and politicians, these scripts that we're constantly being told to memorize. This is how your neighbor feels. This is how this community feels. This is how they think. This is what we're supposed to do. And if we don't accept these scripts, obviously we're bad people. Obviously we need to take a good hard look at ourselves in whatever full-length mirror happens to be handy. And obviously we need to apologize to the world and turn everything around. Obviously, we need to scrape and bow. Let me repeat that. Obviously, we need to scrape and bow. That little phrase has all the devious meaning that you think it does. There's a lot of talk of conspiracy theories around the so-called plandemic and around all these social movements which have popped up as a consequence of the plandemic. Conspiracists like to talk about the annual World Economic Forum and how these people want to change the world with themselves and their ideas in charge. And I admit this scares me. And I'm sure to prepare a video or two about it in the future. But I've never believed in conspiracy theories on the whole for the simple truth that mankind is much too egotistical and much too disorganized to carry any lie much past the front door of whichever room the lie first comes to life. Shoot. Just getting two people on the same page to agree to anything is Sisyphean. All you have to do is look at any marriage, any coupling, to know the truth of that observation. Add in a third or a fourth person or all the participants of the World Economic Forum, and we're supposed to believe that they can keep a conspiracy like this? Nah, I know the human heart too well. But I do believe and the disunified legions of people who would do anything and everything they can to take advantage of a situation. I do believe in people who like to lie, and I do believe in people who love power. And once they're in power, they're going to do everything they can to hold on to it, which involves lying and harm. There have been ample evidence of these people throughout the annals of history. Today, what that means is mandatory vaccines, the discussion of mandatory chips to keep us all in line, teaching entire ethnicities and cultures that they are weak and that somehow they slip through the cracks of God's love. And when that doesn't work, then teaching them that all the teachings about Jesus and Christianity have been willfully wrong. So they come up with new interpretations of Jesus and Christianity. It means teaching that there is at least one ethnicity out there that is guilty for every sin in the world and that no matter how hard they try, they are irredeemable. It means you can switch your gender with a simple proclamation and switch your genitalia by signing your name on the line. It means that we will be encouraged to assault our own mental and spiritual health as we shrug away supply line problems and rampant inflation. This is chaos. We are agreed on this. There is something deep and fundamental missing, and it is being exploited. Why? For the same reason I get calls from people who claim they represent my bank or the IRS or the local police, but in reality are sitting in a cubicle somewhere with no more connection to the people they claim to be than a horse has to pig's feet. Now, there's a lot of you who are going to want to take this out of context, so let me make this clear to you before you edit out your sound bites. Bigotry and prejudice exist. People who believe in ethnic and cultural supremacy exist. And it's damn scary when these are the same people who wind up running governments. Confusion over sexual orientation exists. There are people who need to transition. But everything these days, everything is being phrased as we lack something fundamental. And that fundamental is decidedly not to be found in God, not to be found in our parents or traditional community values from our traditional communities. Everything that we've been told is valuable is being labeled a lie. Now listen, any spiritual person, any philosophical person, any psychiatrist or psychologist or mental health therapist who is worth his or her salt, they will all tell you that the way to heal the world is to heal yourself first. And when, and only when, you have achieved that healing, are you sane enough and rational enough to go out and join the crowd or even draw a crowd to tackle larger issues, community-wide issues. But only after you tend to your own health first, physically, mentally, emotionally, most important, spiritually. This commonality, this throughput, is a God-sized hole, and we're filling it with everything we can throw at it. But nothing is filling that God-sized hole. Crime rates have skyrocketed, mental stress has skyrocketed. You hear a lot of justifiable trepidation from trans activists that the suicide attempt rate and the suicide success rate among transition teens and adults is sky high, and it is. One study concludes 42% of suicide attempts among the transition and those who identify as non-binary. Now, it is a crime of the basest order to draw definitive conclusions from this. Tell me, if we create these so-called safe spaces, but disregard the issues that drive someone to transitioning, how are we helping? A rush to declare a one-size-fits-all solution is a crime against humanity, and it is not helping people. It is causing much, much more harm. And it is multiplying daily, exponentially. This one-size-fits-all is causing untold damage in practically every sector of society. It is an act of the most heinous hypocrisy to take a gander at any data and then draw a conclusion based on that gandered data alone. Suddenly, all of science and history and social casework and economic theory and legal casework is being turned on its ear and kicked to the proverbial curb. You've got one of the major parties pushing all this nonsense, and you have the other major party whose idea of refuting this seems to be to question who is voting in the first place. Both parties are dedicated to the idea that the other party has to be stopped somehow, and no representative of either party is saying, let's work this out. We are not building ourselves, nurturing each other. We either attack, or we patronize. And that is a God-sized hole. Placing God into the God-sized hole is not one size fits all. God's place in our own lives is unique to each individual. Our purpose in this world is unique. All those people with all those unique purposes, acknowledging one another and finding the way our purposes intertwine and build upon one another, now that's working it out. And that's what we need to do. And I will leave you with this until next week. Please hit up like, comments, subscribe. I may be putting smaller video outs in addition to these videos. And peace. 4 fingers. Take very good care of yourselves.